The show is supported by you, our listener. Stick around till after the news to hear more about that. This is Cup of Go for February 7, 2025. Keep up to date with the important happenings in the Go community in about 15 minutes per week. Sometimes more, sometimes a lot more. I'm Jonathan Hall.
And I'm really hoping that today we can keep it short enough because other than news, we have a pretty cool interview coming up. How are you, Jonathan?
I'm good. How are you, Shai?
I am excited. I have started the process of selling all my earthly possessions in anticipation of the move. So I'm trying to sell like my car and my bike and my furniture. I already sold my guitar, just sold my standing desk, which you are familiar with, selling my gun. If any of these interesting products sound enticing to you and you live in Herzliya, please buy them for me, like now, like soon.
I'm doing the opposite. I'm buying all sorts of stuff. We've been furniture shopping, ordered a bed, ordered nightstands and sofas and all sorts of things.
Yeah. Yin and yang. Have you gotten a bed or just a box with a bed-shaped hole in it?
We've ordered a bed frame that will take about 13 weeks to be built, custom built and made for us.
Ah, damn.
The mattress should be here on Monday, so I'll be sleeping on a mattress on the floor for a while.
Well, you're sort of like starting like a peasant and then moving to a custom-made bed frame. That's right. Literally things that only kings had. Very cool.
Is it?
I've only slept on IKEA furniture in my life, I think.
Well, we have plenty of that coming too. But the bed is not actually from IKEA this time. Anyway, we do have some news to talk about.
Yes.
We're not just talking about buying and selling things. We'll also be talking about some security releases, lots of security-related things actually in this episode. We'll be talking about the live episode that's coming up next week. And we're doing an interview with Thorsten Ball. So stick around. He is a lover of Go who has been forced, dragging and screaming to write Rust for the last several months, although I think he kind of enjoys that too. Anyway, stick around to the interview to hear his hot takes or not so hot takes about Go and AI and Rust and other things like that.
Cool. Let me take the reins. Go 123.6, 122.12, and 124 RC3. Well, that's hard to say. Have been released. They all basically include the same security fixes. 2 security fixes, both of which I think are interesting enough to talk about. So yeah, you should upgrade, but let's discuss the content as well because it's pretty nice. If you're on 122 or 123, just upgrade the minor. You should do it anyway. And if you're one of the few kind souls that's actually trying out the release candidate and you're like CI pipelines or whatever, make sure to upgrade your CI pipelines to the 3rd release candidate. The 3rd release candidate is the last one, right? That means that 124 should be released pretty soon.
I don't know if that's official. I think it frequently is, but I don't know if there's like a rule that after 3 you have to do the real release.
Of course there is. Third time's the charm.
Okay.
Anyway, so 2 security fixes. The first one is arbitrary code execution during build. Mm-hmm. So you know how we have to compile our software in order to ship it to someone? So normally what people find is that compiling on multiple platforms can sometimes be kind of hard. But in Go, usually it's pretty easy. Too complicated. Yeah. So I think it's very rare for me to see issues that are related to build and that are platform specific. I've certainly never experienced anything like that. Just, sometimes I mistakenly build something for Linux and then ship it on Mac or something like that. But in this case, when you build on Apple, there's usage of things like executable path, loader path, like any special values for CGO, for like the LD flags for CGO, you can get just arbitrary code execution. So if you have bad flags or someone gives you a package with bad flags, they can just run code on your machine. This is only for Go 124 RC2. So this is not impacted the previous versions. It's a new thing. Funnily enough, the person who discovered this particular issue is Juho Forzen from Mattermost, which we had on the show.
Yeah.
Here's a snippet of that interview.
Nice to be with you. So I work at a company called Mattermost. We are a Go software company, and we do a lot of different kinds of things with Go. I work as a security engineer there, and as part of the role at Mattermost, I've worked with the Go internals for a few years now.
And And other than Yuho's vulnerability, there's a timing side channel attack in an elliptic cryptography package. However, it's like only on specific architecture, like PPC.
In a very specific PPC.
Yeah, 64 little endian.
Which like 3 people in the world have. I think fewer people use that than use Go on Windows.
I don't know, like what, maybe it's like embedded devices, but then why it's 64 bits? I don't know. Anyway, the interesting part about this one is just the nature of the attack. I really, really love side channel attacks. If you don't know what they are, it's basically there's like a cryptography mechanism or like any whatever mechanism that doesn't give you any direct signal back about whether you're successfully like hacking it or not. But you can use a different artifact of like timing, how long it takes, or temperature, how hot the device gets, or whatever, to understand if you're doing a good job. Good way to explain it, I think, is when you're trying to pick a lock, you don't actually see like the pins inside the lock, right? And you're trying to put your lockpick in. And you don't get immediate, until you finish all the pins, you don't get feedback whether you succeeded or not, right? But you can listen to hear if like the thing got caught on the metal there, right? Mm-hmm. So it's sort of, the lock is side channeling information, whether you successfully picked it or not. So in this case, it's a timing side channel where you can understand what is the private key based on how long it takes to generate different parts of it or something like that. But they don't believe it. It actually allows you to recover the private key, but they've solved it anyway.
All right. So those 6 people.
Yeah. Actually, the people who use these architectures probably like hold the nuclear codes or something.
So I think this architecture was a transitory architecture specifically designed to make it easier to port Linux software from x86 to PowerPC, because normal PowerPC is big endian, but I guess x86 is little endian. So by doing this PowerPC little endian thing, it made it easier to port software for Linux to this new architecture. And I don't know how that's really useful, because I would imagine you want to continue the transition and go to big endian later on. But yeah, it's a very, very niche piece of hardware for a very specific use case. I would be surprised if anybody's using this for anything serious anymore. I don't think this hardware has been manufactured for 10 or 15 years or more.
I still think at least pining for like all the machines to make them still work is nice.
Oh, sure. I mean, I'm not at all disparaging the people who solved this bug.
Yeah, for sure. I don't remember what's the guy's name. I think Retro Ahoy or something like that. But just today at lunch, I watched like a 15-minute video of how many Amigas did the Commodore company sell, like overall in the world. And he's just like digging into old shareholder reports he bought off eBay just to try to, I don't know, people have nostalgia for old hardware. Like when I see an old CRT monitor, the big ones, the yellow plastic, the like yellow grayish plastic thing with a curved glass on it, I get like, it's cool. Definitely happy that people work on these hardwares. Not sure it's super critical for Go 124RC3, but sure, guys. At least it gave us a chance to talk about the side channel attacks, which are always interesting.
There we go. Well, kind of like the way PPC 64LE was a transitory architecture, I want to talk about something else that's related to transitions. And that's a new proposal that's been accepted. It's a way to automate migrations for simple deprecations in code. So I'll use an example that comes from, I think, Go 1.16, because I think it's easy to understand. Prior to Go 1.16, we had this IOUtils package that had things like read all and it had a few different things in it. That
whenever I use that, VS Code like strikes it out and says, hey, this is deprecated. Use something else. It
was deprecated in Go 1.16, and the things were moved to various other places, mostly into the IO package proper, a few things to other places. Basically, the Go team decided, having a package just called util is kind of silly. The same thing that you learned back in 20 years ago, that having a package called util or helpers or stuff is kind of silly. The Go team finally caught on to that.
I don't want to date your example. 20 years ago, I was like starting to learn English because I was at like, I don't know, 3rd grade. So just remember, and I assume like half our listeners are even younger than me. So
probably so. Anyway, the point is, these transitions from ioutil.readall, for example, to io.readall is a pretty straightforward transition. Wouldn't it be nice if there was a tool that would do that sort of thing for you automatically? Well, now there will be, because this proposal has been accepted. So basically what you can do, and this works not just in the standard library, you can do this in your own code. You can put a special comment, basically a Go directive in your source code when something is deprecated to tell this tool how to rewrite it to the new version. And then if you run, I think it's called go fix is the command. It will just go through your project and do those changes for you automatically.
Is that a good feature in your opinion?
I think it's a good idea. Yeah.
For standard library stuff, sure, but for any library stuff,
I mean, if you trust the library to be using it, you probably trust it to tell you how to upgrade itself too.
So I'm wondering, like, if the case is that it's easier to, theoretically, it's easier to deprecate stuff and like build unstable interfaces, you're sort of disincentivizing library developers to like think about their API longer and develop stabler APIs. Because they can just be like, oh, whatever, run a new version. You have to run go fix.
I can see that argument, but there's enough times. I mean, and I could say this as the author of an open source library. There are enough times where legitimately a deprecation is called for that I think I would love the opportunity to be able to tell people here's the quick and easy way to update. You know, I mean, a really simple example, even simpler than what I did, is one where just one function is replaced by another one, and we already have the comment deprecated, use blah instead. If you put a go fix in front of that, it'll automatically just rename to use the new function now.
How does the directive work? The ioutil example is a good one because you have to change the imports as well. You can't just call a new function.
So yeah, they talk about that in the discussion on the proposal. It may add and remove imports as needed if that's appropriate, depending on the change.
Cool. And writing the go fix like directives, is it like a super cryptic language or does it look like sane?
Good question, Shai. So basically what you do to make this work is you add a go fix inline directive before the function that has been deprecated or in the Go doc for the function that's been deprecated. And it will essentially replace calls to that function with whatever's inside that function. So if your deprecated function is called readall and it just does say return io.readall, then when you put go fix inline in the Go doc for ioutil.readall, the go fix tool will just do the inline for you, basically. So it will then call the new function for you. So you wouldn't want to do this on like a big hairy function that does something crazy. You know, if it's a 50-line function, you wouldn't want to put go fix inline because then you're going to copy and paste those 50 lines all over someone's code base.
Yeah.
But for short things where something, you know, the order of function arguments changes or the function name changes, things like that, it's a really easy way to do that for you.
Cool. It's another command like to remember, but it doesn't seem like you have to run it in every CI or anything like that.
Oh, no, I would run it.
It's one of these things that you do manually.
Yeah, I would do it manually, probably once every few months or once every time I upgrade a major library or a version of Go, for example.
Cool. New thing. New good thing in the standard library. In the standard tools, I mean.
The standard tool chain, yeah.
Like Jonathan said, we have a lot of cool security things for you. One of them is a blog post from a company called socket.dev. Socket Security. Socket.dev is their domain. They do a supply chain security, which is like there's a lot of companies that do that. Funnily enough, like when you look at their page, one of the things you find is Socket versus Sneaks, Socket versus Dependabot versus SemGrep, Endor Labs, blah, blah, blah. All these companies, what they do is they try to prevent vulnerabilities from entering your code through your dependencies. So you don't want to import a library with security bugs. Now, libraries that you import or dependencies that you can have two types of security issues, right? Intentional or unintentional. The case they published a blog post about, I think it's super interesting. It's also very simple to understand, is a malicious package that's just based on like type squatting, right? Typo squatting. Typo squatting, basically you have a package in a name that looks like the thing you'd like to import, but it's not actually it. In this one, I think the interesting thing they did is the typo is not in the package name. It's in the organization on GitHub. So very, very hard to see because if you look at code examples, like at your code, it's not like it's the package name is different from official documentation. So your code snippets look the same, but the organization on GitHub, so just the import line is different. In this one, it's the Bolt DB database. Have you used the Bolt DB? Do you know like what database it is?
I know what it is. I've not used it.
What is it?
I believe it's Go native key value store.
And it's like super widely used. It's not niche at all. It's used by like a ton of organizations, Shopify, whatever. And the malicious package is boltdb-go/bolt. And this one has malware in it. What happened is they created it a lot of years ago. It looks exactly like the same thing. So if you install it, and by the way, I think it should even work.
They effectively forked the real code and added their thing with a near identical organization name, right?
Yes. And it was uploaded on November 2021, which is super scary to like read. They uploaded the package, and GitHub tag is pointing to a clean, legitimate version, something that looks like a fork. It's not a fork, it's a mirror. So you can't see the like link to the original, right? But it looks like a clean, legitimate version on GitHub. But on the Go, when you run Go mod install, it's not, because in Go mod, it's cached as the previous tag. So they changed the tag, but only on GitHub, and they didn't notify Go mod. And because Go mod has no other way to know, Go mod points to the old tag, which is malicious. Again, it gives the attackers access to run arbitrary commands on your machine. Not great, especially like when you're building DBs and things like that. Go module, you might ask the question, wait, why didn't the Go mods update when I changed the tag, right? But it makes a lot of sense that the module is immutable, because otherwise, like, you could build the same package and get two different things. You really wouldn't want people to be able to upload a new version. That's where you have the lock files, etc. But yeah, it's there's a function that attempts to continuously go to a hidden domain and execute some shell commands without any validation, with weird ass names like _r and apil init, like just very clearly shitty names.
I'm taking that personally. Those are names I use every day in my code.
Yeah.
But by the way, the repository, the entire organization on GitHub is now gone. I guess GitHub decided that they didn't like hosting.
So Kirill, I don't want to say the name wrong, but Kirill Boychenko published this like 2 days ago. So I assume they're jumping on it at this point.
Yeah.
The code itself, the malicious code itself, is also interestingly obfuscated. Like the IP addresses and the ports are saved in constants called max memory size and actually saved as numbers, and max index and max port and things like that. But they just transform it and replace it with dots. So it actually becomes the IP address and the port of the CNC server. Very if you go read the blog post on saga.dev, it's linked to the show notes. You can look at all the ICOs. I assume if you use the product like the saga.dev, it will report it for you. But since they published it publicly, I assume Dependabot and others will do the same. At least I hope they will. It's a cool attack. I don't want to praise it because it's a bad thing. I think it abuses GoMod interestingly, and I'm wondering how many more cases of this actually exist. Or maybe you can even target specific organizations, right? That that use a specific dependency. So if you knew Uber is using a specific Go dependency like Zap, right, their log library, maybe you can create Zap with double P and hope that one of them installs it one day. And all you need is once if you want to infiltrate a specific organization. So a really cool blog post and security work done by Socket Security here. I really liked it. Well done, Kirill. Very cool stuff.
I get so bored with my logs sometimes. Do you know anything I can do to improve that?
Well, someone posted on our Slack a pretty interesting solution. I guess if your logs were more sassy, more ghetto, you'd be happier, right?
That would help.
So someone wrote a log hook. This is funny. I don't know if I'd actually ever use it.
I know I would.
Is.
Yeah, because it requires Logris. Which no shade against Logris. I've used Logris. I have some patches in Logris, but now that slog is in the standard library, I never intend to use Logris again.
So other than the fact it uses Logris, what is it? It's a hook for your logs that goes to a local Olama server, so basically a local LLM model, and asks it to ghettoize your logs, which is absolutely hilarious. They have like ghettoize.new ghettoize function, which asks, like, basically it's all a wrapper around take the log line and around this prompt. How would you make this log entry more like a ghetto sentence? The output should be already valid to be the log entry. Don't give me options and choose one. Feel free to use emojis. So pretty good. And it uses Olama, which I've been meaning to. Have you like played around with Olama locally? No. I've deferred it again and again. I was like, I have to find something to do with a local LLM. Like, because I use LLMs quite a lot, but I have them everywhere. Like I have them on VS Code and I have them on GitHub and I have them on like ChatGPT, which I pay for, et cetera, et cetera. And I was like, I need to run local models. Like what will happen when I'll like be on a long flight, right? I want a model on my machine. So this project gave me the excuse to finally install Olama and start playing with it. Manuel Martos, thank you very much for the project, which is very interesting. I really like his GitHub page. It's like the most set up thing I've ever seen. It has like GitHub stats, GitHub trophies, languages I'm currently learning, contact information. Pretty cool stuff. And this project is just kind of funny. If you do use Logris, I don't know if anyone is. If you do, can you try it and show us the results, please?
I was a little surprised that there weren't some examples on the README.
Maybe we should like fork it and add support for standard library as well.
For slog?
Slog has hooks. Can I hook into slog?
Why not? It calls it handlers, but yeah, it's the same concept.
I'll definitely do it at some point. Speaking about things I'll do at some point, let's talk about the episode next week. Let's move to our ad break and talk about next week's episode. And you should stick around because we're not only doing ads. We have a really interesting interview with Thorsten Ball.
So we have a live episode coming up in 1 week.
Woo-hoo. 1 week from now, it's our 100th episode.
Yes.
We'll do a live stream on all the platforms. We're testing it like right after we're finishing this recording. But just mark it in your calendars. It's going to work somehow. There's going to be some link or some service you could click on. Join our episode.
We will announce that link on our Slack channel.
And our Patreon group.
So if you're not a member of either of those, you have a couple days to go sign up. And then you'll get notified.
We'll probably spam people on social media as well, like LinkedIn and Twitter, but just if we're really extra. We're planning a live episode February 13th at 1800 UTC. So it should be like early enough for American listeners. Just like start your day with joining your podcast. And for European listeners, it's like evening, you're off work. Should be a good time for everybody.
And if you miss it, of course, we'll also post a recording to our regular podcast feed and probably on YouTube and maybe a few other places.
And just make sure to put it in your calendar if you do want to join. We would really appreciate it.
And bring a news item or blog post related to Go that you want to share with us,
or a friend, who wanted to introduce to your show, and you're like, "Have you listened to that podcast I've sent you?" And they're like, "Nah, man, I don't know. I don't have the time." Like, join the live episode. That'll be. Speaking about our communities, so we have the Slack group, Slack channel. You can join the Slack channel on the Go for Slack. It's a cup-o-go kebab case where you just talk about the show and some random stuff. Or if you want to extra support the show, you can join as a Patreon. It's $8 a month and it helps us support the show financially. But this is a hobby. We do it for fun and to learn, but it does cost a bit of money. We need to buy boxes of microphones and then buy the actual microphone a week later. We need to pay for editing, to bleep out all the whatever. I actually use the curse words this time, Filippo. Sorry, so you actually have to bleep them out instead of me just saying bleep these words out, etc., etc. So if you want to support the show, come join as a Patreon member. Or if you don't feel comfortable giving money, that's also fair. Maybe rate the show on your podcasting app of choice, Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever. Or share the show with a coworker or a friend or a co-student. so more people hear it, because that's always fun. Anything I'm forgetting?
You can also give us money in exchange for swag if you really want to do that too.
Yeah, this is not really supporting the show. It's more just fun stuff, because I think on average with shipping, it's like we're totally breaking even.
We break even. Yeah. But still, it's nice to have a little Brewster mug or t-shirt, and then people can say, where'd that t-shirt come from? And you can tell them about the show that way.
For sure. If you're planning to go to any of the conferences, usually we talk about conferences on the show. This week we skipped the conference.
And Fosden just happened, and it was completely off my radar because I'm not in that part of the world anymore.
We're not giving the European vibes anymore for the show.
That's right.
GopherCon Israel is coming up soon, but I'll mention it next week. The swag store is also open, and the best item that you didn't mention is the hoodie.
Oh yeah,
that has become a daily wear for me, especially now that it's so cold here in Israel and raining. We also wanted to mention a cool new service by a friend of the show, Josh Bleeker-Snyder. If you have a merge conflict, how about you go to merde.ai, merde.ai, and have the AI fix it for you. I'm not going to say anything else. If you want to go and check it out, check it out. If you struggle with merge conflicts. Thanks, Josh, for being a friend of the show and developing all these awesome services. That does it for the ad break. Let's jump to the interview. Don't forget to come to our live episode next week. So, Jonathan, we've been doing this show for like 2 years now. And I think it's time we find like a better name.
Okay.
We have Cup of Go. Cup of Go is nice. But maybe we can do something. I'm imagining old-timey sign. Hol and Nechmad. Nechmad and Hall. What do you think?
That's going to be hard for me to pronounce, even though I lived in Holland for a while. That sound just it isn't natural for me.
Well, it's not like we can do Hall and Ball. Oh, wait. Thorsten, why did you tell us how we pronounce your last name?
Hello. The last name is not the problem usually. Ball is pretty easy to pronounce. The first name, Thorsten, is hard for people. And only this week I've realized that I can, in the past I said like, think of Thor. And then at Sten, Thorsten. And this week I realized, no, like people know how to pronounce Thomas in English. And it's just that with a different ending. So yeah, I don't know.
So think about it, Hall and Ball, if you ever want to take the show on the road. Thorsten's easy, but maybe that's just because I played a lot of Skyrim.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so other than potentially renaming our podcast, why don't you tell the people about yourself?
Yes. So thanks for having me. My name is Thorsten. I am software engineer, occasional writer. I guess for this podcast, I'll do the Go-focused introduction. I've been writing Go since 1.0 came out in 2011 or 12, something like that. I don't know. And then I joined SourceCraft. Well, in 2016, I published a book called Writing and Interpreting Go, which some of you might know, followed up in 2018 with writing a compiler in Go. I joined SourceCraft in 2019 and worked there for the next 5 years, also working mainly in Go. And then, this is where it gets spicy here. Last year, I left SourceCraft, or say, 1 year and a few months ago, I left SourceCraft and started working at Zed. And I started writing Rust full-time every day. Yes, after 3 years and multiple attempts of using Rust in my spare time next to Go. I did it professionally now for a year. But now I'm going back to SourceCraft after this year of Rust. So right now, in fact, I am unemployed this week. I'm starting the new job next week. So I can basically say anything I want right now because it's just my opinions and not those of my employer. So that's my intro.
Very cool.
I have to first off say it's really nice to hear that even though you're doing Rust now, you're still willing to talk to us mere Gophers.
Man, I still like Go very much, and I missed Go. I really missed a lot of aspects of Go.
We'll talk about that in a little bit. Go ahead, Shai.
Yeah, I wanted to start, other than all these things, you also have a Substack called Register Spill.
That's right.
Which is how I actually sort of got to know you. I think I saw the books before, but I have to admit I didn't read them. And you have a specific newsletter you put out called Joy and Curiosity. And I've been scrolling through Substack because I've been trying to replace social media with like better things. I just saw like people trying to prep you for interviews and obviously like AI generated slop that nobody wrote and nobody's going to read and it's just going to generate numbers. And then I stumbled on Joy and Curiosity, and it really caught me. The way I see it, maybe you explained it a bit differently, but it's sort of a list of links that you found interesting that almost necessarily aren't the main context, the main focus, the main job. They're almost necessarily these cool random things that you would send in the random _tech channel in your Slack or in your Telegram group with your co-students or wherever you are, where you have a cool link. It's not directly what you're doing right now, but it's just so cool that someone built it about tech. Someone built something really cool or someone wrote something really cool. You have to put it somewhere. And you sort of aggregate all these cool links you find and just put it in a weekly newsletter. And instead of calling it the Tech Roundup or blah, 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 you call it Joy and Curiosity. So before we dive into the specific links and how do you collect them and what do you like about it and what's coming this week, why Joy and Curiosity? Why that name?
Good question. So yeah, first of all, thanks for the appreciation.
It's great. Everybody listening, go follow if you have Substack, which I don't know if I recommend. But you can do it in an email newsletter as well.
Yeah, there's also an RSS feed and whatnot. Yeah. And it's a normal email newsletter. Yeah. So the background is the newsletter is called Register Spill, and I started it because like when Twitter morphed into X and every day people were talking only about social media and they were switching to this platform or doing this other thing or quitting it altogether, I realized that I kind of want a place that's not that noisy or a place where I can just write stuff. So I started writing Register Spill with the idea being that once a week I just sit down, Sunday morning it was in the first half year, and just write for an hour what's on my mind and, spilling the registers. And then over time it slowly transformed into, now it has thousands of subscribers. And then I added this special edition that comes out every week of the same newsletter called Joy and Curiosity. You had some good way to phrase it. What was the question you just had? Why call it this?
Tech Roundup, Thorsten's awesome links. You won't believe which links Thorsten found this week.
Yeah. This is how I wanted to tie it together. I just said this, I wanted to quit social media because, not quit it, but I think there's a big problem with social media in that people often it seems to come easier to people to share negative stuff or stuff that they don't like. And I've become super conscious of this and I really try my hardest not to do it. Sometimes I slip and then I delete a post after 10 minutes, which sounds incredibly weird to somebody who's not, addicted to social media. But what I wanted to do was, spread positive things and spread curiosity in the thing that we all do every day, like programming computers. And the reason why I started to do it was that while writing Register Spill, I realized that, it's hard to come up with a topic every week. That's certainly one thing. And then one trick that I found for me was that, people have been saying this to me for a few years. They say oh, your passion is inspiring, or you get other people excited about this stuff. And I can't help it. I just get excited about computers and programming, all of this. So then when I started to think about what should I write about, in my mind, I went, look, if I went out for beers with the buddy, what would I talk to them about if they were also programmer? And then I just started to write about this. This was my mental hook. And then I realized that I also want to share this other thing. Exactly like you said, I would send friends these links in, iMessage and whatnot, or WhatsApp, and so look at this, or I would tweet it out, right? And people appreciate this or thought it was interesting. So I started to put it in a newsletter. And then it started with me just putting it at the bottom of another, mini essay, whatever you want to call it. And then I made it the main thing every week. And yeah, Joy and Curiosity, I think it's a good combination to have, enjoying what you're doing, being curious about it. And I think that's kind of what I want to foster. And that's also, why I find this stuff interesting, because it does give me joy. And I do find I also realized that the reason why I'm still doing this and I don't know how long you guys have been programming, but I noticed that when you start out programming, in the beginning, you kind of assume everybody's the same roughly or has the same motivations. When you have 4 other junior developers, you all want to become a senior engineer and whatnot. And then after a few years, in my case, I saw people that have been programming as long as I have kind of drop out or get bored by programming because they, after doing it for 8 years, you just become bored of it. Like I myself have, now that I've been doing it for nearly, 20 years, driving a car has become boring for me, And if you're 20 years old and you've been driving a car for 2 years, you're super excited about this. And I realized that this is what other people go through with programming. They kind of lose interest. And so that's fine. Like that's completely okay, But for me, I realized it just doesn't stop. I still find it interesting. I still find it, it brings me joy. So I kind of want to foster this and share it with others. And it seems to resonate. Like it seems to resonate with a specific group of people. Like
for me, it's really itching I get a lot of newsletters and most of them don't last over 2 months in my inbox. Some of them I signed up to, because they're friends and whatever. But ones that I signed up to actually to read, most of them don't last. Most of them I start archiving, and then the moment I realize I'm auto archiving this one, I'm gonna unsubscribe. But this one I'm like, oh my god, so many cool links. I've never heard that OpenOffice can't print on Tuesdays. Yeah. What the fuck? How does that work?
Yeah, there's this internal struggle that I have from time to time where I think, if I want to grow my audience, I guess I should do something that people think will be useful for their day-to-day job, Like if you write a newsletter that's called Keeping Up with the News Things in AI, whatever, then maybe people sign up because they think it's important for professional development and maybe they can get their boss to pay for a subscription. But then I always realize that, that's not what I'm interested in. Like I would rather do this other stuff. And I mean, this, I guess, but I'm often also surprised by how people respond to what I put in because it's sometimes I just link to a tweet or sometimes just to one sentence of a tweet or a comment on Hacker News or wherever it is. Basically just things that sparked other thoughts or that created some sense of curiosity or joy. And not to go too meta, but over time I realized that in the beginning, the thought was, oh, isn't it easy to find these links? Like people have probably seen this too go by on Hacking News. So they've probably seen this go by on Twitter or wherever. But then I realized that everybody's really unique in the way they absorb information. And that's what makes them unique in some sense. Like all of that stuff comes in and only some of that stuff resonates. And if you kind of take that stuff that resonates with you, you will end up with a unique combination, even if all the inputs are equal, And so I don't know. I've been leaning on this.
It's a lot of fun. I do have a question.
Yeah.
Jonathan and I, we also have a similar cadence, right? Once a week. Is it a weekly thing? Now I realize it's coming on Sundays, but I don't know if it's every
it's
week.
Weekly.
Yeah. So cool. So Jonathan, we have a similar cadence, right? We collect links over the week and put them in our backlog. And then once a week, we do a program about it. So you can draw similarities between what we do and what this newsletter. You know what I mean, Jonathan?
Yeah, definitely.
We cover 3 topics, 4, maybe 5, and then it's really the long shows where people don't even get to the ad break a week, and that's a struggle. I'm opening this last one, the second to last one, Join Curiosity number 23. I think there are 30 links here. How do you get so many links and actually read them? Do you have structured time every day to go hunting for links and actually fostering it? It doesn't happen drive by?
It definitely changed how I consume things. So I do have a node. I'm looking at it right now. Basically, it's just an Apple node in which I drop stuff, right? Just stuff that might be interesting. And sometimes I add a thought next to it or some other thing. And right now I have 15 or something. And I'll probably throw 5 of those away. So over the week, I just drop stuff in. And out of those 30, you just said, I think 5 of those might just be links to tweets or something, or stuff that somebody else sent me. Maybe I think in that issue, maybe even added a comment like, hey, I haven't read this fully yet, but blah, blah, blah. And I think the rest is just stuff that I just came across, like a video I saw or some tweet file that linked to some other thing. And then there's 2 things happening, which is this newsletter made me then more conscious about, I should really read this. So instead of just saying, oh, this looks interesting and skimming over it, I'm like, okay, before I link to this, I have to read it. So I then make some effort to put some time aside. I also, now have the Readwise reader in which I add stuff and then try to read it. So number of links also has grown, but it's not, I wouldn't say it's something that I put a lot of extra effort in. It's mostly all of the reading I do anyway. And then just, I don't know, then just collect it. And maybe there's 1 or 2 or 3 things. There's been Thursdays where I'm like, I don't have anything. I got to write this on Saturday or something. And, I got 4 links or something. So then I would dig into my email inbox, links that I sent myself, or I would look into Reader or some other stuff. I also have, a backlog. If something becomes too long, I put it on a backlog so I can link it to some other time. And then, you also see me sometimes not cheat, but I can do whatever I want in that format. It doesn't have to be up to date. So sometimes I can just pull out old links and say, I watched that video again that I've been watching for 10 years, Rich Hickey, really Simple cool. Made Easy, right? And it's this, I've seen that talk 5 times, but then it comes up in a conversation with some other program and I'm like, I should link to this again, right? Mm-hmm. Because not everybody has seen it. And if you internalize this, that David Ogilvy, marketing guy, he said, you're not advertising to a standing army, but a moving parade, meaning you're not always sending stuff out to the same people. Every week, different people might tune in and not everybody has seen the same stuff that you've seen. It's totally fine to share a link that, some people have seen maybe, 5 years ago. They won't get pissed off by this. They won't say, this guy, I've seen this before. Why does he link to this, Yeah. But others might not have seen it. So there's nothing bad about being loose with what you put in.
Cool.
Really good point.
So what I need to internalize is I need to watch Simple Made Easy again.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's a great talk.
Yeah, it's a great talk. I reference it all the time. One final question about the Joint Curiosity. Yeah. What's the, on the upcoming one, what's the, link that you're most excited about?
Let me see.
You're all getting a sneak preview just because you have the press. We have the press. Cards.
I've been really into the AI stuff, and obviously, there's been a lot of interesting thoughts on the whole DeepSeek release last week, and now analysis coming out, and I'm kind of. I don't know, the whole, it's a bluff, it's a double bluff because they pretend it's, it costs more than they say it costs. I find that stuff fascinating. So there's a bunch of stuff that I kind of bookmarked and read. And then the other thing that I was staring at where I wrote 3 lines of comments already in my notes was where somebody was comparing Wayland versus X11 input latency on Linux. And I worked on the Z Linux version last summer on the X11 version. And it wasn't a good time. And I read this and I just thought the whole, I don't want to, offend anybody who's a big Linux fan here, but if you read this, the whole Wayland versus X11 thing, and then you compare it to say macOS application development, it's night and day. It's just, there's no wonder that, high quality applications on Linux are rare, or say cohesive high quality applications on Linux are rare. So yeah, that's kind of, it's this. And then I don't know, there's Jimmy Miller wrote a great blog post that's in there. This morning, this week I'm unemployed. I have too much time this week.
Yeah.
So this week also there was some interesting thing with some guy who makes all of these different fonts, and he had a new monospace font that he said as a system font in macOS, which I thought was interesting.
Monospace system font on Mac?
Yeah. So
this is exactly what I mean. I want to say, okay, let's stop the recording. I have to go install it and see how it looks, because I already have monospace font on Slack. And that's been like really helpful.
There's one link above this is a link to a YouTube video called, let me see what the name is, the Intel 486 DX2 66 megahertz startup sounds. It's just a, 50-second video of the startup sounds this computer makes. And that brought me joy, like just listening to that thing boot up and the hard drive and like the beeping and.
Cool. You mentioned you were very much into the AI stuff.
I want to hear about that.
Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. I don't know how to kick I don't want to fall into the trap here.
I think there's like a few hot takes out there, right? That we can either agree with or debunk if we want to. So, of course, the big hot take is developers are all going to lose their job within 5 years. Or some will go so far as to say everybody's going to lose their job within X number of years. All creative jobs will go, and then manufacturing jobs will go because AIs will build the robots that manufacture things, and nobody will have any jobs anymore. So that's the one extreme. And then there's the other hot take. This response to that is, no, that's all baloney. Every time we've had an advance in technology, cars didn't reduce the number of people who went around, it increased it, right? You make a road bigger and more people drive on it. The internet meant more people when we went to AWS, server sales skyrocketed because now people are installing more servers, et cetera, et cetera. So, the flip argument there is AIs may make us more effective on a per task basis, but we're going to take on so many more tasks and do so many more things that there's going to be a huge shortage of development talent out there. Two strong views, opposite ends of the spectrum. Where do you fall? Or do you fall off of that spectrum somewhere?
I would say I fall right in the middle, in the sense that
nothing's going to change at all. I know that's not what you think because I read some of your writing.
No, what I mean is I've been, I worked at Sourcegraph 2 years ago when the whole AI thing started to kick off, when Sourcegraph also went and built an AI assistant. I was part of that team. And back then I was highly skeptical because the variance was too high. Like you would use ChatGPT and it would spit out like 50 lines of Python, impressive. You try it again the next day, completely unimpressive, totally wrong. And then you had all of this hype going on and I just didn't see it. I didn't see how it would even change things. It felt like you had an unreliable Google or Stack Overflow or something like this. And I didn't understand it. I didn't know. Looking back, I also didn't know how to use it, or I didn't understand it enough to know what to use it for. And I think in the last 2 years, this has changed for me by one thing, and that is the models have become better. Like that's just what it is. I think even a year ago, it was completely different. But now, since the summer, Claude 3.5 Anthropic, that's a completely different thing than 2 years ago, ChatGPT. And that's one thing. And the other thing is that what really changed things for me was in the last 2 months, I worked on the AI team at Zed on inline completion, meaning, what Cursor has Copilot inline completion. And we built this for Zed. And to do this, we worked with LLMs and we fine-tuned LLMs. And when you do this, you collect data, which is a lot of plain text. You have to label data. You have to generate data. You have to analyze data. I realized that LLMs are really good for that. Like they're really, really good at taking, say, 100 files and you give them the option of which of these 5 labels would you give this file. And if you run this a bunch of times or even just once, you get pretty good results. And you can see how this is a lifesaver. And for me, I don't know how to put it into words yet, but for me, I started to realize that there's this mechanical nature of it all where, these things are really good at taking fuzzy stuff and turning it into non-fuzzy stuff, which is a big thing that we've been missing in computers. Like, you can now take a screenshot of this screen and send it to Claude and say, where should I click, to end this call or something. And it can pretty much tell you where to click. And that's huge, I think. And working with text, working with data, fine-tuning stuff, playing around with inline completion and seeing how good it can be and how much of the mechanical stuff that you do in day-to-day programming it can take away from you or it can help you with made me realize that, this is... I made a category error. The LLMs are not this, this oracle that helps me do all of the stuff that, some people say it is, or it might be one day. But for me, it's just more this, oh, they're really good at working with text. And guess what? I work with text all day because I'm a programmer and, code is text. And give you like one example here. I was a Vim user for many, many years, 2 decades, basically. And in the Vim community, people are obsessed with being really efficient with like navigating through text and whatnot. And there's like, how you jump, and I think it's called quick scoping and easy find and all of these things to jump to specific characters. Mm-hmm. And while working with LLMs, I realized that LLMs can be in the same category as these tools. If you have a small local model, it can predict where you want to jump next. Mm-hmm. And then you just have to hit tap, 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 tap. And putting the LLMs not on, taking them down from this pedestal and putting them into the category of, this is a tool that works with text, a thing that, I can use the mechanics this thing allows me to have to get more productive with the thing that I do. That kind of changed things a lot for me. And I don't know how much of this made sense, but it's this, I guess it changed things for me, and I see them now as really useful things to work with text, meaning they can be pretty good when writing code, and they can also be really good at generating small amounts of code, and they also allow you to turn a lot of fuzzy stuff into non-fuzzy stuff, and they can be super helpful, And one last thing on this, and this is not, the appeal to authority, but people were super skeptic of AI, and like I said, I was too, but then you would see all of these programming legends suddenly switch over and kind of get interested in this stuff and see it or use it, like Antirest from Redis, John Carmack famously, right? And Mitchell Hashimoto, HashiCorp, he doesn't use a language server, but he uses Copilot, right? Mm-hmm. And that guy is one of the best programmers I ever seen in action. And he trusts Copilot to write Zig for him. And that changed it for me, where I started to think, okay, if these guys use it, I should take a closer look. Like, then it's not just all bullshit. Something has to be there. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so now, will they take our jobs? Will we all be out of a job in a few years? I do not know. Are they just a fancy autocomplete? No, I don't think so. But I do think they are to sound super fancy, a paradigm shifting tool that will change programming. I think programming has changed multiple times over the years, right?
Yes.
We started with punch cards. Nobody uses punch cards anymore, right? Why should programming stay the way it's been for the last, say, 10 years? And where people write just text in a text editor, everything, right? Why wouldn't we go into this hybrid mode where some code is written by AI and people review it, and other code is written only by humans and stuff is merged? Like, I think stuff like this will happen, where we change the way we write code, because now we have these machines that are surprisingly good at writing lots of, small amounts of code. And
let me ask you something.
Yeah.
You mentioned just Vim users being like obsessed about the finding. I found a lot of joy. Like, I felt smart and cool when I wrote this macro, which fixes, I don't remember which Golang CI-lint error, but a pretty complex Golang CI-lint error that does have a pattern. I think it was reusing or something like that, and not reassigning it. And I found a way to copy like the name of the function that I'm doing, and then capitalizing the first word, and then putting it at the end of the error, and then adding a colon if it doesn't exist already in the file. And then I had it in a macro. I felt super smart, and then I did it a couple of times. It obviously took me longer than it would to Command I on the file in VS Code and tell Copilot, hey, can you please rename all the error variables to corresponding names to avoid this lint error. And if you click on like IntelliSense right now, the first options are not the autocomplete, and the previous IntelliSenses are explained with Copilot and fixed with Copilot. So it wouldn't even have to type anything. Like, it would just offer me fixed with Copilot. A lot of you speak about this with a lot of passion, where the other things you mention, enjoying curiosity, are often very low level programming things, right? That feel to me that are going to disappear. We're not going to do cool Vim macros anymore because like there's no point. So how can you be so excited and curious and joyful about these like very human programming things that feel to me like they're drawn from like ages past and not looking forward, and also be very excited about this like Pacific Rim mind melding you and Claude going to attack the Godzilla together?
I think the answer is that I don't see it as two opposing ends. And I once saw it like this. Like a year ago, I would have said, in one corner, we have AI slop, as they call it. And on the other end, we have handcrafted software where people with care and passion, expertise and skill, aligned every line, But then what changed for me was that I started to I began to find the same fascination with LLMs as I had for somebody who writes Vim macros, right? Like, you have to have some kind of, romantic idea of what you're doing to become fascinated by Vim macros, right? Because if I go out on the street and I tell somebody, hey, I just use like 2 keystrokes to do what others, would use 40 keystrokes for, they don't give a damn, right? But you do because you care about something here, right? And it's not this, a person is sitting in front of a screen and typing letters on the keyboard. You have some idea of, what you find fascinating about this. And once I started looking into LLMs, and I realized that it's this, all written text on the internet compressed into numbers, into vector space, where you can have like, one vector meaning the king, and then if you subtract the vector of, male, and you get out the vector of queen or something like this, like, it's just marvelous that this stuff works at all. It's just fascinating. And then when you think that they took all of the public code or whatever it was and condensed it into numbers, and now I can take my code, turn it into numbers and shove it in there, and out come a bunch of other numbers that are a completion of the code that I just wrote. That is fascinating. That's as fascinating to me as the guy who spent 10 years, hand aligning his Emacs configuration to whatever it is, to, be aligned to the Fibonacci numbers on every 10th line or whatever, like, so I get fascination from this. And the other thing is that a bigger, equally important thing is that I don't like doing things that I think are a waste of time. And I think with the advent of LLMs, a lot of programming for me felt like a thing of the past or a waste of time. Like, hey, I want to write a script where, I have 5 CSV files in this directory and I want to load them all and concatenate them and output them as like an XML file in some other thing. And I can do this. Like, I can write you that script in probably 3, 4, 5 different languages, right? Mm-hmm. But I will have to look into documentation. I will have to figure out how this library works, whether this has, CSV in the standard lib, blah, 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 blah. And doing this and writing this by hand for the sake of writing it by hand just feels like a waste of time to me. Like, I can hit a button and Claude can generate me that same script and I can move on and do other interesting stuff. So, yeah.
Thanks for sharing your thoughts on AI. I think you have a pretty balanced take there. It's kind of refreshing to hear after, as we're talking about on social media, where everyone's always trying to get the last word and hot takes everywhere. It's nice to hear a balance to you. And on that note, you used to do a lot of Go, and now you're doing Rust. I'm curious if you would compare and contrast those, maybe in a balanced way, or hot takes if that's your thing. Whatever. What are your thoughts about those two languages, since that is a hot topic out there?
Yeah, my balanced take is that I think that Go's values overlap with my personal values more than Rust's values overlap with my values.
Okay.
And specifically, I think built into Go, there's a big focus on simplicity and minimalism, and like, I don't know, no bullshit in some sense, rawness, whatever you want to call it. And also pragmatism and trade-offs and all of that. And I think that resonates with me a lot. And that's also what I've been missing a lot in Rust. For example, Go famously has made trade-offs to not put stuff in the language that I could have put into language to keep, say, compile times down. And then people say, oh, Go should have this and should have that. But I love that they have this explicit trade-off. Like all engineering is the managing of trade-offs, I think. And they made some good trade-offs and they really care about the ergonomics. I think the first language that really shoved this into the focus, the ergonomics of a programming language. Like, oh, you have a built-in test tool. That's amazing. You can compile and run and test your code with a single tool. You have a formatter built-in tool. The formatter has no configuration, right? Mm-hmm. That's what I love. And they made trade-offs. Sure, it lacks in other areas, but they consciously, I think, made these trade-offs. And if you look at their issue tracker and Russ Cox's comments and whatnot, and Ian Lance Taylor's comments on how they think about adding stuff to the language, you can see that these are incredibly nuanced and detailed discussions where they have a lot of thoughts on, pros and cons of different things. And I really appreciate this. And with Rust, I found that, the community, I think they like different things that I like. It's a nice language. It's often also fun to write it. Sometimes it's not. They have some amazing features in it. I do love the enums. I do love the match statements. I do love, how much you can do with the print line command, because I'm a print line debugger. There's a lot of stuff that I love. They have include string, which is like how the Go embed stuff, but kind of nicer. I also have to admit, I do like macros sometimes, like writing my own. It's cool. Joy and curiosity. There you go. Macros. But for example, whereas Go would say, little copying is better than, adding a dependency, I just need this function from this, library. I'll just take this function, put it in my code. I would say that in the Rust community, they would add another crate or something. They would add another dependency. Mm-hmm. And that just is, to me, you create a new, I asked this for scientific purposes a while back on Blue Sky. I asked, if you had to create a small web server with Rust, which library would you pick? And they would say, Axum, which is a web framework with Tokyo. If you do this, I don't have the number, but I would bet 50 dependencies will be pulled in, right? And your target folder that contains the object files and compiled dependencies, it'll be huge, hundreds of megabytes. And that to me is just guys, I don't know. It doesn't resonate with me. Mm-hmm. And there's other stuff like this where I think, and I wrote this many times in newsletters and on my blog, that I'm not a perfectionist. I don't believe in perfection. I think I'm an 80% engine, and I don't think perfection is achievable. There will always be trade-offs. There will always be downsides to anything. Mm-hmm. And I think the Rust community would think that there is perfection achievable. It's always 100%. And it's this, I want to get the current timestamp and print it, right? In Go, time.now, and you print it. Mm-hmm. In Rust, wait, what time? What time zone? What time zone in relation to what other time zone? How do you even want to print it? Because that's not, if you don't specify this, you just might get this out and it's undefined. So blah, 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 blah. And this, sense of, perfection is achievable. Everything has to be 100% perfect. That doesn't resonate with me. And the other thing, I think over the years as a programmer, I've kind of become wary of abstractions. And I think in Go, there's not a lot of abstractions. I kind of have to admit that I've never really tried Go with generics, so I might be missing out, but I don't think I am.
Don't worry. 90% of people didn't.
Yeah. And so I become kind of skeptical of too many abstractions. And I think in the Rust community, there's still the sense of, abstractions are good. If we can make this indirect and this side doesn't have to know about this side, then that's better code. Even though there's only one caller and one callee, and this won't change in the foreseeable future. But how about we separate these concerns and put this layer in, and this is actually a trade, and this implements this trade, and this does this. And I think there's a lot of this, and often for good reason. But, everything I'm saying is just to say that there's no specific thing where I would say, this is super bad about this, and this is super bad about this. And I also don't agree with a lot of these blog posts that compare languages on a feature by feature basis, on whether this type system does this or whether this type system does this. For me, it's, what the kids would call vibe space. It's do I think if I use this language, do I feel like I'm running in the same direction that the community or the author of that language was running towards? Or am I going with the flow of that community or that language? And with Rust, I often had this feeling that, no, no. Like, I would trade a lot of the type system and the borrow checker to get better compile times. And the Rust community, I don't think would sign that contract,
Yeah, definitely.
And the Rust, the Go community is different. And JavaScript communities come some completely different, again, and Python and Ruby. And yeah, I don't know. It's not a technical answer, but that's kind of my take on things. That I like simplicity. I like ergonomics. I like trade-offs.
That means you're going back to Go this year?
Yeah, I mean, at Sourcecraft, there's still a lot of Go. I think I don't think they ripped out all of it in a year.
Yeah.
I think there'll also be a lot of TypeScript. There'll also be Rust, I think.
There's this wave of people who've been working a lot with Go. You mentioned HashiCorp. That's a good example, right? He wrote Go for like 10 years and then moved to Zig.
Yeah.
And I saw a few of these blog posts. And Jonathan, I think we even discussed some of them, of people like sort of burning out on the simplicity and looking for something more challenging.
Yeah.
But I guess it's just what you're looking for. Are you looking for a challenge in the thing you're building? Do you want to get it built and see what it does? Or are you looking for a challenge in your editor? Are you looking for architectural challenges? Are you looking for business challenges? Are you trying to like build a ton of businesses and the code is just a means to an end and it doesn't matter at all?
Yeah. I everything I said so far in this recording is always comes with the asterisk
can and will be used against you.
It always comes with the asterisk of it depends on the context. Like, do I like somebody code golfing and being, building the most minimal thing in Vim language? I do, yes, on a Saturday morning, but not at work, not when I'm shipping something that's to be used in production. And I think I watched an interview with person who's using Rust, and they also switched from Go to Rust. And I don't know how experienced they are, but they said, they like Rust because it's fun. Because in Rust, it's like all of these little puzzles that you have to solve. And I think Rust, in that sense, it's like catnip for programmers. It's this, you get the feeling of accomplishing something by writing code in that language, and you get that sense of, I solved another puzzle by making this match statement, like do exactly this in that amount of code. But I would say that's cool, but have you actually shipped something of value to your users or to your customers? And, yes, on a Sunday morning, give me all of the code golf you have. I love it. Yesterday I saw like a Game Boy emulator in JavaScript that looked written by an alien life form. I'm going to link to it too in my newsletter. Nice. Is this code that I want to debug in production? 100% no. Yeah. And cool. I think sometimes when people say, I'm tired of Go simplicity, that doesn't mean it's a bad language to build products in, right? Mm-hmm. It just means that you got tired of something. But that's a different thing, man. Like, that's a different thing than...
So the formula is Rust on the weekends?
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, like, it's an absolutely... How much do you enjoy working with the language you're working in? That's a completely fair thing, right? Mitchell Hashimoto, he said on the Primogen podcast 2 weeks ago, he said, all he can say is that he doesn't enjoy working in Rust. Like, that's all he can say. Like, there's technical stuff you could talk about, but it doesn't change the fact that at the end of the day, he doesn't feel like he's enjoying this. And for me, it often was the same. Like, I would write Rust and think, it's not fun. Like, it's not, I can see why, but this is not fun. And
I'm getting back into TypeScript right now. And it's been difficult for me to find this spark of like, this is awesome, this is fun, and like programming instead of fighting with a type system bolted onto a browser language for some reason.
But the other, just to get back on this point, like people saying Go is boring, and Mitchell switching from Go to Zig. I think for the stuff that he's building, Go is just not the terminal emulator Go is not a good fit. Like, it just wouldn't work. Like, there's also this, and Z is written in Rust. And I think Rust is the perfect choice for this. Like, they built this high performance text editor that interfaces with macOS, system level frameworks like AppKit and like the GDC, the global, what was it called? The global dispatch queue and whatnot. Grand Central Dispatch, GCD, sorry. And you can't do this in Rust. In Go. You have to use Rust or some other language you drop down to the same. And for that, it is perfect, right?
Yes.
But that doesn't mean it's perfect for all of the use cases, all of the time, right?
For sure.
So
Cool.
mild take, I guess.
So, it's actually refreshing.
Yeah.
Is it?
It's a chill take, even.
I think it's also a great segue into our stumper question. I guess this isn't a stumper question anymore. The first one we did a couple years ago. We tried to kind of stump people, make them think hard, but this shouldn't be too hard. The question is, when you were learning Go, who influenced you the most? And like you've already talked about how you identify with sort of the Go ethos. So I'm guessing you've thought about this before. Who has influenced you? You already mentioned some names, but just who may be the most?
Two come to mind. One is my friend Felix Geisendorfer. He now works at Datadog. I don't know if you guys had him on, but back then, 2012, 13, he was starting to get into Go. He would not shut up about it. Like we made a joke. Like we were at JSConf in Florida in 2013, and he would be sitting at tables with different people, and we would say, "Where's Felix again?" And we would make jokes like he's trying to convert people to Go again, and we would walk over, and he would be sitting and talking to them about Go, and he got me really interested in it. So then I started to look into it, and then I think like Dave Cheney was a influential guy. Like his blog posts and his writing on Go really made me see like the beauty and the simplicity of it. Then obviously, Ross Cox's writing or Rob Pike, like his talk and like all of those early, Go programmers that had this. Back then I was coming from Ruby and JavaScript, and I felt like I was now in this other world where there was this sense of systems programming, which, now looking back is kind of didn't turn out to be, say, Go's forte. And, but there was this sense of, like this is proper engineering. Like the people writing the Go garbage collector, they know what they're doing. They're really hardcore on this, and the simplicity and the trade-offs and the thinking, not just about, a friend of mine put it this way. He said, the big problem that Ruby made was that Mats thought that, Mats, the inventor of Ruby, he said, developer happiness, that's what's important. Like the language should serve developer happiness. And my friend said he made the mistake of thinking that developer happiness is only about syntax. He forgot the tooling. And I think, I don't know how true that is, but I think it's kind of an interesting angle to look at things from, because 10, 15 years ago, yes, the language itself, like the syntax you would write stuff in, that was so important. Like people would discuss operators and whatnot and blah, blah, blah.
Because they had time while their C++ was compiling, so they had time to worrying. And
but then Go came along, and you had like this fast, Go test and Go build and how you ship stuff, single binary. And people would say, oh, it's such a fat binary. This is 8 megabytes for hello world. And guess, who cares? Like nobody did and still doesn't. And this focus on ergonomics and like this conscious choice of trading, say, in some elegance for ergonomics, that's what, I don't know, really appealed to me.
Cool. We are definitely writing down the people you said, which is difficult because some of their last names are hard to spell, to try to invite them on. We did, I'm 85% sure we had Felix's tweet about performance optimization in Go that he did. We featured that on the show. So we might reach out to him as well. Cool, like seeing these threads link, because I didn't know the guy, but I follow him on Twitter. Cool. Where can people find all this joy and curiosity and high performance editors and all these beautiful links and yourself and the books if you haven't read them?
Yeah, so you can find me at thorstenball.com if you know how to spell it, or the name of the newsletter is registerspill, registerspill.thorstenball.com. I'm on Twitter /X, Blue Sky, mostly these days. You can always send me an email. I'm happy to receive any sort of email. I don't know if I'll regret saying this.
People signing you up for all these sorts of...
My books you can find interpreterbook.com and compilerbook.com. And I think, that's basically it.
And all these links, listeners, you can find in this week's show notes, which is in your app somewhere. I don't know what app you're listening with. So if you wrote your own custom Rust/Go/TypeScript RSS feed podcast thing with Claude last night, I don't know where you put the show notes, but there you can find all these links. Thanks a lot, Thorsten, for coming on.
Thanks so much. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Great. We'll have to do it again and talk about other things.
Waiting for the next Join Curiosity. I can't wait to see what's on it.
Awesome.
Thanks a lot.
Program exited. Goodbye.